You've probably been asked this before, but if you can afford your Grail pen but have a small collection, would you get the Grail or focus on exploring more diverse, less expensive pens so as not to plateau? So this is a tough question, and one that is going to be very individualized, very personal. So I'm just going to speak very much from kind of my own background and experience here. It's going to depend a lot on the situation, so I'm just going to ask a number of questions for you to kind of ponder. Like, what kind of collection are you looking to build up? You say small, is that 3 pens and you're looking to get it to 6? Or is small 40 pens and you want to get it to 100? You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be very relative there. How expensive is your Grail pen? Literally, some people, a Grail pen is a TWSBI 580 or a VAC 700R. That's not unusual for me to hear about. Or Pilot Falcon or Lamy 2000, you know, even. Some other people, you know, their Grail pen is a Pilot Custom Urushi, or the you know, Namiki Emperor Toryumon that I showed last week. That's their Grail pen. Very different, you know, if you have, you know, you can have a collection of Lamy 2000s and Pilot Vanishing Points, for example, but then your Grail pen can be a $5,000 pen. So it's just going to be very different depending on what you're talking about. If you don't, for me, I think a question to think about is, if you don't actually love your Grail pen, if you get it and it doesn't quite live up, how easy would it be to sell it or recoup that money? You know, if your Grail pen is one specific vintage pen that is like really hard to find, isn't particularly valuable, super niche, but you just really want it bad and you pay for it and you don't love it, how easy is it for you to turn it around and sell it and then put it back into the rest of your collection if you are so inclined to do that? I think that's something to consider for sure. And then, you know, have you had a chance to actually hold or write with your Grail pen first? Or is it just kind of your own perception or hype or an idea in your mind that you have, like, I would really love this pen, but then you actually hold it and you're like, oh, this is really back-weighted and I just don't like the way this thing writes. That's a huge bummer, you know? Or it's like, oh, I really wanted this special nib grind, you know, if you're like, you know, whatever, I really wanted this specific kind of, you know, like Sailor, for example, has a lot of these really interesting nib grinds, King Eagle nib or something. You're like, I really wanted a, you know, no, not an Emperor, King of Pens. Sorry, Emperor is Namiki. I really wanted a King of Pens with a King Eagle nib, and then you get it and you're like, oh, this nib writes really fat. I can't really use this thing as much as I want to. Dang it, you know, that can be a disappointment kind of thing. So, you know, are you going to be able to kind of know what you're getting into first? I think it depends on, you know, you fall into, you know, kind of one of two classes. I think about people who are minimalists. These are the people who will buy pens, and if they're not in their regular rotation and using them every day or have some really meaningful significance to them, they will sell them, get rid of them, recoup what they can out of it, even if it's only 60% of what they paid for, and they'll apply it towards their next pen, whether it's expanding their collection, you know, breadth-wise, or going deeper and more expensive. I know plenty of people who will do that. They're like, I have a 10 pen case, that's all I want it to be, and I will rotate things out until those 10 pens there are the absolute best 10 pens in the world for me. Totally cool. I support that and respect that a lot, actually, that discipline to be able to do that. Me, I'm not really able to do that. I have a huge case over here filled with pens because just my style of collecting and just the referenceability and the accessibility of them. I'm an extremely tangible person. I don't have a great verbal memory. So when I'm trying to think back to like, oh man, like about pen details, I have an okay visual memory. But I'm trying to think back of like, yeah, you know what, how does the weight compare to, you know, of like, for example, you know, the Pilot Custom Urushi. I'm like, how does the weight of this compare to Visconti Opera Master? And I'm like, I can kind of remember, be like, man, I remember it was lighter. I don't remember how much, but if I pick up the pens and hold it, I'm like, oh, boom. Like, it just triggers my memory immediately. So for me, I like to have a lot of pens on hand because it's easy for reference, and that's just the way that I work. Not everybody's the same way. You may not have the same need to recall stuff like that like I do, so it's not anything to worry about at all. But me, it's like, oh man, was that pen eyedropper convertible? I'm trying to remember, but then I look at it and I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely. Like, it just, boom, just holding it in my hand instantly triggers it back and I'm good. So that's just my style. I am not a minimalist. I am more of what I would call an acquirer. Or a collector, yes. Collector is just a more disciplined version of an acquirer. But acquirer is like, I get pens and I generally hang on to them. I do not get rid of them in my personal collection. Of course, buying pens and selling pens is my day job, right? Like, and that's why this whole Goulet pen company exists. But in my personal life here, I rarely sell or give away pens because it's part of my little collection, right? And I'm sure that it's got to have a limit to at some point. I don't know where that is yet. I keep raising the bar for myself there. But for me, just the way I started out is I went incremental. Like, I did kind of a blend of the two. I kind of fell into both camps. So for me, I started out really slow. I was getting like Noodler's Nib Creepers, Lamy Safari, Pelican Script. I'm thinking of some of my earliest pens, the Petite One, the Kaweco Classic Sport, just relatively inexpensive pens like that, and kind of amassed a variety and collection of those. Part of that was because I needed to get a breadth of fountain pen experience just as a person who was in the business, right? Like, and I needed to kind of get it. I was getting asked about a lot of things. I'd never used them, so I kind of spread it around. So for me to buy just random expensive pens didn't make a lot of sense for me at that time. I did do that a little bit. I got into some gold nibs, but I went entry-level stuff. Pilot Custom 74 was my first gold nib, and then it was a Lamy 2000, and I kind of went incrementally there. So that first year that I was in fountain pens largely was less expensive pens. I did do that first year, I did one kind of Hail Mary pass on a pen. Not a pass, I'm thinking like football analogy now, but I did like one Hail Mary purchase, which was a Pelican M800 with a 1.5 millimeter stub. And I had never used it before. I'd heard so many good things about the Pelican M800, and there was a blue version with I loved stub nibs, so I was like, oh my gosh, if I love a Pelican Script stub, how much am I going to love a 1.5 millimeter stub on an M800? And I had no experience with it. I just bought it. It was a stretch for me at the time. I got it. I had the wildest expectations, and I got let down just because I didn't do my research. I didn't really know what I was getting into. I overbought on something that I didn't have proper expectations for. And even to this day, I've gotten over it now. Of course, that was 7 years ago, but I have a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth just because of my own ignorance and lack of just awareness around what I was doing. Now, just like everything in the early days of Goulet pens and my own experience, I've learned through mistakes, right? Like the first ink that I ever bought, I thought it was more saturated than it really was because I saw it when it was wet. I didn't see it when it was dry in a pen. That's why we sell samples now. That's why we have a swab shop. Like, I've taken a lot of those things and tried to use my own negative experiences, or not even truly negative, just less than expectations experiences, and tried to turn those into, okay, what can I do to help you all avoid that so that you can go faster on the curve of the learning curve of getting into fountain pens, and you can get quickly into the things that you really truly enjoy. Because there's kind of there's a hump you got to get over a little bit with learning how to use fountain pens and stuff like that. But once you cross over that hump, like you find generally what nib sizes you like and what inks you like, all this kind of stuff, then your enjoyment level goes way up, and you got a long life ahead of you enjoying fountain pens. So I want to try to shorten that life. A little bit different experience that I had 2 years ago. So I had a much more fountain pen experience under me. I had a much more of an idea of what I kind of liked. So I'd had on my radar the Visconti Homo sapiens, right? Very common, holy grail pen for everybody. So for me, I waited until we actually started carrying the brand. I didn't buy it ahead of time. I knew based on demand how popular it was going to be, and I got to try them and stuff like that and hold them and all that. But in terms of buying one for my personal collection and carrying it around, I didn't do that until after we actually started carrying the brand. And I took my time. I tried different nib sizes. Of course, I had to do like writing samples for the nib nook and all that kind of stuff, and I had to do all that. But I got to write with them all and really determine what it was that I was going to like. And then once I was able to do that, I knew that I was really going to enjoy it. And I've been enjoying it as a daily carry now for basically 2 years. So I learned from my previous approach. It's not that I substantially did much different. I just had more awareness about it and what I was getting into. So for me personally, I think it's my own experiences. It was better to kind of build up and get into it. And I think if you have a minimalist approach, yeah, it'll take you a little bit of time to you know, try out, you know, higher and higher level pens until you kind of work your way up to a holy grail. But I think that in the end will be better for you than just kind of, you know, just randomly buying pens you think you might like and then not. But you certainly could, you know, like my Pelikan M800, for example, I could have gotten that, been like, yeah, this pen just didn't live up to my expectations. I could have sold it at 80% of its value right away, easily, and recouped most of that back, and then applied that towards the next pen, and really not have lost out a great deal. I would have learned, you know what I mean? But you can bypass a lot of that if you are able to go to a pen show or do a pen meetup, or maybe just link up with somebody online and do a pen swap or something. It's harder to do pen swaps with Holy Grail pens, but you know, certainly you could have some resources there to be able to try before you buy, of sorts. Or if you have a brick and mortar store, you know, if you have a Holy Grail pen, it's a $5,000 pen, they may not let you ink it up and try it, but you might be able to hold it at least. So you can at least try, educate yourself, read reviews, do all that kind of stuff, of course, but there's nothing like actually having it in writing with it to be able to tell. So if you can do a pen meetup or something like that, that can help tremendously for anybody that has. And you can let them know, like, hey, Visconti Homo sapiens, it's my Holy Grail pen. Does anybody have one that I can write with, that I can try? Because I really want to make sure that I know. That's a way that you can kind of skip some of the steps in that whole process that I just talked about. But that's the approach I've taken. That's what I recommend.